This will be a story about a world of horror and inhumanity. A world of nightmarish memories, of devastated lives, of unimaginable human suffering. A world that may seem to you unreal, exaggerated and unimaginable in its brutality. But this world was real. This world is our world in the mid-20th century. The story will involve the mass murder of millions. The footage will be disturbing. If you need to take a breath or look away, please tell your teacher.
I think we were always raised first as Germans and secondly as Jews, very much like most of the children here are raised first as patriotic Americans and then Jewish, and we were raised first of all as patriotic Germans and secondly Jewish. That's how we were raised, absolutely. There was no such thing in my town as a Jewish neighborhood. We grew up wherever people could afford to live, which is probably somewhat what's happening these days.
Laupheim had a very large Jewish population. I mean, 300 Jews in a town of 6,000 is a pretty good percentage. And everybody got along very well. It was a very nice life. I had very many friends, Jewish friends, but I think I had more non-Jewish friends than Jewish friends because through my sport activities, there were more non-Jewish people involved than Jewish people. I was the only girl in my class. I was the only Jew in my class, and it never made any difference. I mean, I never felt any anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is prejudice, hostility, or hatred of Jews, perceiving them as an alien and undesirable group. It may manifest as rhetorical or physical acts of violence toward Jewish community institutions or individuals. World War I ended with the Treaty of Versailles, signed by a defeated Germany in 1919. As a result of the measures under the treaty, Germany sank into economic chaos. The socio-economic factors of the post-war period turned people against some ethnic and religious minorities, including especially the Jewish community. The widespread presence of Jews in German cultural, economic, and political life made them scapegoats for Germany's misfortunes. Revising the Treaty of Versailles and finding scapegoats became the main platform of the rising far-right parties. One of them was Hitler's Nazi Party.
I was very much aware of the Nazi movement coming online, but we were not all that concerned as far as certainly our family was concerned. My dad always said, well, these movements, they come and they go, like so many did during the Weimar Republic, which was a period after World War I. One regime after another came and fell. So they all thought this would be just a glitch, really, but it turned out to be otherwise.
Hitler's program consisted of 25 points making up his plan for what he called Germany's recovery, which included segregating Jews from Aryan society and depriving them of all their rights. Aryan race refers to the now long discredited theory that Germans were members of an alleged master race, Aryan race. The Nazis promoted this false notion that glorified them and denigrated all other races.
But I had very good friends of whom I knew that they were members of the Nazi Party since 1928. And she was one of my best friends. She didn't care that I was Jewish, and I didn't care that she was a Nazi.
In 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. He was appointed head of a coalition government, and his party went on to win a plurality of votes, 44%, in Germany's last free elections. Hitler viewed world history as a racial struggle for the survival of the fittest. He saw Jews as the source of all evil: disease, social injustice, cultural decline, capitalism and communism. Anti-Semitism would become the predominant ideology of the Third Reich.
Sie vergewaltigten auch die deutsche Kultur, zersetzten die Literatur, nisteten sich im Theaterwesen ein, verunstalteten die Wissenschaft an den Hochschulen, verunglimpften die deutsche Kunst, machten sich die deutsche Presse hörig, zerstörten das deutsche Rechtsleben und vernichteten unsere Ehrauffassung, vergifteten den Geist der deutschen Wirtschaft, schufen das Glücksrittertum in der Industrie, beuteten den Bauer und Arbeiter aus und würdigten den deutschen Handel herab.
Hitler spoke of Jews as germs, putrefying bacteria, and parasites. Jewishness was claimed to be contagious, and public space was segregated so as to protect pure Aryans from Jews.
Overnight, you could not go into a public place. No restaurants, no swimming pools, no movies, nothing. You were not allowed in any public place anymore. And the people that you knew wouldn't talk to you anymore. Friends that you had, they would shun you, most of them. Not because they hated us all of a sudden, but they were all afraid, because that was the way it was. You talk to a Jew and you'll be punished.
Hitler's plan began to be implemented point by point. A main role in this regard was played by the Nazi propaganda machine, which manipulated public opinion by means of strong images and simple messages. They were produced by the newly established Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, headed by Joseph Goebbels. A fanatical follower of Hitler, Goebbels was a skilled public speaker and a vitriolic anti-Semite. It was he who directed the Reich's well-developed propaganda machine, which aimed to brainwash German society. Propaganda, a message often consisting of misinformation aimed at influencing people's opinions or actions towards some cause or position that benefits a particular group or individual. The dominant subjects of Nazi propaganda were racism and anti-Semitism, the pure Aryan nation, and the unity of the German people, military heroism, and the cult of the Führer. The media and arts, mass public events, school education and youth organisations, Hitler Youth, Hitler Jugend, and the League of German Girls were all skillfully deployed to advance this agenda. The vast majority of all ethnic Germans living in Germany who did not suffer from hereditary disease became members of these organisations.
We felt so, why can't we be part of it? Why can't we? Everybody said Heil Hitler, like this. I did too. What did I know? I was 8 years old. So my mother said to me, you're not supposed to do that. I said, why not? She said, haven't you been told that you were Jewish? I said, oh, I forgot.
The main message of the government was that, by their religious and social difference, the Jews were undermining the moral, political and economic foundations of Aryan society. Anti-Semitism became an ideology of the Third Reich, taught even in kindergarten.
A pseudo-scientific rhetoric was developed to justify and explain racism and genocide. In specially created scientific centers, eminent university professors worked on racial purity and the Jewish question. According to them, measures had to be taken to prevent these inferior people from reproducing.
3 or 4 times in those 2 years, I was asked to come to an Olympic training camp where I met all the other hopefuls, and I always did better than they did. And if you can imagine what it feels like to compete in the Adolf Hitler Stadium in front of only non-Jewish people, who most of them wanted to, get at me, and maybe they didn't have very nice thoughts about me. What is this Jew doing there? And when I beat all the Germans, that was even worse, and I was always afraid. I was afraid day and night that something was going to happen to me.
Between 1933 and 1939, the German government enacted hundreds of laws to define, segregate, and impoverish German Jews. The goal of Nazi propaganda was to demonize Jews and encourage Germans to see them as dangerous outsiders in their midst. These laws banned Jews from professions such as medicine, teaching, or the law. In schools, the teaching of democracy and equality was removed from the curriculum, and the ideas of racial pride were included. Jewish children were barred from schools.
Our best friends were no longer allowed to talk to us. The teachers were no longer permitted to ask us questions. They weren't even permitted to reprimand us. There was to be no communication between Aryan and Jew.
Nazi officials and organizations subjected Jews from across Germany to constant public humiliation in a deliberate and planned way. Some Orthodox Jews were shaved, had their hair cut, and were forced to remove their hats in public. Intermarried couples and their children were mocked and forced to parade with various humiliating signs. Despite Adolf Hitler's harrowing talk and growing violence against Jews, indifference was the prevailing mood in Western Europe and the United States. In the summer of 1938, delegates from 32 countries met at the French resort of Evian. During the 9-day meeting, delegate after delegate rose to express sympathy for those seeking to leave Nazi Germany, but most countries, including the United States and Britain, offered excuses for not letting in more refugees, which everyone knew were mainly Jews facing persecution. A large part of German society had come to view the Jewish community as a cancer in the otherwise healthy German body, and as the main obstacle to Germany's recovery from the post-war crisis.
Sie sollen sich hüten. Einmal wird unsere Geduld zu Ende sein und dann wird den Juden das freche Lügenmaul gestopft werden.
This tension, orchestrated by Nazi propaganda, escalated into a nationwide anti-Jewish pogrom on the night of November the 9th, 1938, which has gone down in history as Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, for the shards of broken glass that littered the streets.
And I walked the streets of Cologne. The first thing I did, I went over to the synagogue. I got within 1 block of the synagogue, and there I saw the Talesims and the prayer books laying on the street. I think some of them were even burning. And people milling around the synagogues who were not Jewish people, believe me. And I was concerned to get closer, and I turned around and walked away.
In a single night, more than 7,500 Jewish-owned commercial establishments were destroyed, and thousands of shop windows were shattered. Jewish homes were searched. More than 250 synagogues were burned to the ground. 30,000 Jewish males were arrested and sent to concentration camps. 100 people were killed. Kristallnacht changed everything and set off a chain of events in German politics and society from which there was no turning back.
Public opinion was shocked by these events, and after a parliamentary debate on refugees on November the 21st, 1938, Britain agreed to take in Jewish children, provided they would not be a burden on the state. The first Kindertransport arrived in Harwich, Great Britain, on December the 2nd, 1938.
Nearly 10,000 children fleeing the persecution of Jews in Germany and the occupied territories were brought to Britain. Most of those children never saw their parents again.
We were sitting at table having dinner, and my mother's plate remained untouched, and then she suddenly pushed her plate away and looked at father and said, "I heard today that both Eva and Vera can go to England." And there was a deathly silence, and my father suddenly looked very pale and drawn, and he buried his face in his hands, and then he sighed and said, "All right, let them go."
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I said, the first thing I have to do is get out of Germany. I don't want to be here anymore, and there is no future for me. So when I came home, I told my parents I want to get out.
Despite the vast resources of Nazi propaganda, Kristallnacht had a short-lived effect. The ideologues of the Reich realized that they needed to develop a well-coordinated plan in order to achieve their goal, the removal of Jews from German society. Hitler was aware of something else too. Passive anti-Semitism in Germany and the other European countries was an ally of his that would allow him to execute his plan.
On August the 23rd, 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed a non-aggression pact called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. Secret protocols of the treaty defined the territorial spheres of influence Germany and Russia would have after a successful invasion of Poland. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, triggering World War II. France and Great Britain declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September. There were around 3.5 million Jews living in Poland at the time.
We were sitting in a classroom and we smelled smoke. Across the street from us was a beautiful, beautiful Jewish synagogue, one of the nicest one in Poland, and it was burning. To our horror, we heard the screaming of the people who were locked inside. We were children, we were petrified that it's going to happen to us.
In April 1940, Germany invaded Denmark and Norway. In May, Germany attacked France, the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Belgium. In June, Paris fell and France surrendered. The swift and unexpected victory over France avenged Germany's defeat and humiliation in the First World War. It propelled Hitler to a new level of popularity and trust among the German people. On June 22nd, 1941, the Germans and their allies invaded the Soviet Union, which had been its main objective all along. A new stage in the Holocaust began.
I remember that our home was completely wrecked. I had never seen my home like that before. There was like clothing and blankets on the floors and boxes and dishes, and nothing was, the kitchen, the living room, everything was just wrecked. And my father was sitting on the couch crying. And I was behind him. I just see him sitting on the couch amid all this debris, crying, and my mother standing there. And I remember saying in Polish, which I don't think I can say it in Polish any longer, I said, "Daddy, don't cry, we will live. You see, we will live."
Under cover of war and confident of victory, the Germans turned from the forced immigration and imprisonment of Jews to mass murder. Special Action Squads, or Einsatzgruppen, made up of Nazi SS units and police, moved with speed on the heels of the advancing German army. Their job was to kill any Jews they could find in the occupied Soviet territory. Some residents of the occupied regions, mostly Ukrainians, Latvians, and Lithuanians, aided those German mobile killing squads by serving as auxiliary police. The German killing squads and their auxiliaries murdered at least 2 million Jewish men, women, and children in mass shooting operations. A wave of violence against Jews swept across all occupied territories. Local populations participated with astonishing zeal.
I remember there were not many people left. They, at gunpoint, took us outside and they put us around the church. The church had a white steeple, a white church. Why the church? Around the church there was like a lot of space. They had probably an order, shoot 1,000, shoot 2,000. Since we weren't human, we were numbers, so it didn't matter, right? I'm sitting on my mother's lap. She is holding me with her body like that. Why was I not shot? Why was this? We don't know.
In July 1941, Hermann Goering, Hitler's second-in-command, authorized all necessary preparations for the final solution of the Jewish question in European territory under German control. Mass deportations to concentration camps began in October 1941, even before the elaboration of a coordinated plan for the total annihilation of Jews. Such a plan was elaborated at the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. That is where Reinhard Heydrich, the official tasked with preparing the final solution of the Jewish question, announced the script for the Holocaust and presented the stages in its execution. Deporting Jews to ghettos, organising forced labour of those fit to work, subjecting survivors to special treatment, that is to say, killing them.
Holocaust, the genocide of more than 6 million European Jews during World War II, as part of a deliberate extermination program planned and executed by Nazi Germany, also called the Shoah. During Hitler's 12 years in power, the Nazis established 20 main concentration camps, with numerous subcamps for forced labor and extermination. People were sent to concentration camp without a court order for an indefinite period of time.
So in the beginning they took the sick ones, the crazy ones, the people who were less educated. The Jewish police went to door with a list. They knocked on the door in the middle of the night because people would lock themselves up. They didn't want to come, so they went to the houses to grab him at the middle of the night. One day they came for me in the middle of the night.
Originally, German occupation authorities established ghettos to concentrate Jews and separate them from the non-Jewish population. In German-occupied Warsaw, the walled ghetto that German Jews entered as newcomers in 1942 was already a place of mass suffering due to terrible overcrowding, lack of sanitation, disease, and starvation imposed by the Germans. Later in the war, many ghettos served as staging grounds for the transportation of Jews to the east, euphemistically called resettlement by the Germans, who promised their captives better conditions and opportunities to work.
People endured unimaginable suffering on journeys that lasted days, without food, water, or toilet facilities. Many of the weak, the young and the elderly, died before reaching the destination.
The minute they opened the wagons, it was just total, complete misery, beatings and screamings and beatings and barking of dogs and growling of dogs and commands given. It was just like you open the doors and all of a sudden you find yourself in this inferno, in this unimaginable horror that you, as an adult or a child, would see in nightmares. And we were just holding on to each other, and I don't know, within minutes, my mother and my sister were dragged to one side, and I was dragged with my dad to another. We were told to go to another side. And they never had a chance to say goodbye to my mother, never had a chance to say goodbye to my sister.
Three camps were built in late 1941 and early 1942 and went into operation in the spring: Belzec, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Despite the appalling conditions and killings in concentration camps, extermination camps were just that: places of mass killing in which the vast majority of those sent to them were killed immediately. It is estimated that 1.7 million Jews were gassed to death in just 2 years, 1942 and 1943, in the Operation Reinhard death camps. The names of some of the other camps in occupied Poland, built and managed by Nazi Germany, are Auschwitz-Birkenau, Chelmno, and Lublin-Majdanek.
Trainloads of Jews, Slavs, Roma, and others would travel from all around occupied Europe to meet their death in the gas chambers. At the largest of the camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau, transports arrived from all across Europe. In less than 5 years, the SS and their auxiliaries killed nearly 1.1 million people in the Auschwitz camps. Over 90% of the victims were European Jews, and for many people, Auschwitz remains synonymous with the Holocaust itself.
Where apparently people from the train who were too sick to move, were put into these ditches with the dead, living with the dead, just left there. And later on, they took these bodies and piled them up high.
When prisoners were unloaded on the platform, men were separated from women and children. Initially, the newcomers who received a serial number were photographed for the camp registers. But since their physical appearance changed beyond recognition very quickly, the camp administrators began to tattoo the serial number on their arms.
I saw the needle going in and out, putting ink inside, in and out, in and out. 27,633 with an A probably for Auschwitz. And I was looking at it, and the woman who tattooed me said these things to me. She was a young woman. She must have been 17, 18. She was killed right after she did all the tattooing. And she said, "What's your name?" My name was Tola. She said, "No, from now on, it's 27,633. Give me say it." I didn't know what numbers were. I didn't know what thousands were. I didn't know anything. She says, "Remember it, learn it, remember it, your life may depend on it." And here am I, showing my number to the Russians. Of 57 children, I think, survived under the age of 8. Everybody else was gone.
Before they were killed, people stopped being individuals. For Nazi statistics, they were numbered camp units. Prisoners who were sent directly to the gas chambers were never given serial numbers and were never tattooed. In 1941, the administrators of the genocide created an assembly line for mass murder, inventing mobile gas vans and then static gas chambers which served two purposes simultaneously: killing many people in a small area as quickly and effortlessly as possible, and facilitating the killer to release the gas through an opening. Use of gas vans began after Einsatzgruppe members complained of battle fatigue and mental anguish caused by shooting large numbers of women and children.
Jag heter nog för mig Juktsar Roshalo från Dortmund. Steht hinten gegangen als Korridor raus auf den Hof. Ein Haus, das vierte Tag auf den Hof, in dem Schloss. Da hat ich gestanden, zugestellt an Nota, und da hat uns herangejuckt und so haben geschrien. Ich gehörte die Frauen schreien, Schma Israel, so haben schon gesehen euch, wie sie sind in Neppich. Also hat mal herangejuckt nach Nota. Eine spezielle Rotte, mit noch zugemachte Klappe. Man hat gehört, ein bisschen Rosen, schreien, die Menschen, muss still. Also in noch zugeschüttet, 1 Meter hoch gewesen, so wie von Dreh, mit zugeschüttet. Sie gewesen 5, 6 Meter tief noch, und so hat man gewagt, der Mensch. Die Geriebe gegangen, schief, oben Breite, hinten schmer. Sie hat mich kennt warfen der Ehe darauf. Sie hat geworfen, ein Stock, noch gestanden noch eine, hat geworfen weiter höher.
Gas vans were used, particularly at the Chelmno extermination camp, until gas chambers were developed as a more efficient method for killing large numbers of people. Gas chambers were specially designed and constructed facilities with doors of thick steel insulated with rubber, hermetically sealed and locked from the outside, all designed to maintain the illusion of a shower room. The piping actually served to carry the poison gas Zyklon B into the chambers. SS men escorted the men, women and children selected for death to the gas chambers. These people had to disrobe before entering the gas chambers. The SS men kept the people fated to die unaware of what awaited them. They were told that they were being sent to the camp, but that they first had to undergo disinfection and bathe. After the victims undressed, they were taken into the gas chamber, locked in, and killed with Zyklon B gas. Then, they burned the corpses in pits, on pyres, or in the crematorium furnaces. Those whom the SS judged unable to work were killed, often within 2 or 3 hours of arrival. Those who could work would be used for forced labour under punishing conditions. When they could no longer work, they, too, would be put to death.
The system of concentration camps fell under the jurisdiction of the SS, Nazi Germany's paramilitary force. It employed thousands of people, including doctors who performed medical experiments and selected those who would be sent to the gas chambers. One of the most infamous of these was Dr. Joseph Mengele. He became notorious for performing unethical human experiments of dubious scientific value, often involving extreme cruelty.
C'est une ligne de prisonniers qui passe et il dit à gauche, à droite, à droite, à droite, à gauche, à gauche, à droite, à gauche, gauche. On ne sait pas si la vie est à droite ou à gauche. Et parfois il fume sa cigarette et il casse le rythme. Et vous êtes totalement impuissant, vous êtes devant l'absolu, c'est le moment du grand jugement. Et le sort a voulu que je passe 4 fois du bon côté.
More than 2/3 of the newcomers to Auschwitz-Birkenau, mostly the elderly, the sick, women and young children, were sent directly to the gas chambers. 200,000 children were killed in this camp alone. One of the most monstrous aspects of the Holocaust is represented by these numbers. 1.5 million children were murdered in the Holocaust.
The Nazis forced Jews to facilitate the process of their own extermination. Jews carried the bodies from the gas chambers and the crematorium. They cleaned the grounds, undressed the newcomers, cut the dead women's hair, stored their clothes, sorted their gold dental crowns.
Z paleniem do pieca trzeba było ostrzyć włosy, przeglądnąć usta, jak były złote zęby, mostki, no to się na mostek wyjęło, nie? Ale zombie jak był, dajmy na to, miał koronę, to trzeba było wyrwać, nie? I mało tego, trzeba było się przeszukiwać, dajmy na to, gdzieś w nosie, w ustach czy nie ma, w uszach. To jak SS-mani stali i pilnowali tego, no to my to robili.
Gold teeth were extracted and melted down into bars, sometimes more than 10 kilograms a day. The Nazi death camps operated until the end of the war. The Nazis kept meticulous records of their atrocities, but some of the camps were dismantled before the place in which they were located were overrun by the Red Army. The gas chambers and all the other buildings were demolished. The camp areas were thoroughly ploughed and planted with grass, and farms were built over the camps. Determination of a precise figure is complicated by the fact that almost all of the Operation Reinhardt records were destroyed. As cited, perhaps the one most palpable statistic is the report that mentions that the Nazis collected 3 tons of women's hair in the 3 camps.
In late January 1945, the SS urgently emptied the Auschwitz camp and tried to cover up evidence of its crimes: files, records, death certificates. Most of the documents were quickly burned. Only a small part of them and photographs were kept. When the Red Army reached the area of the camp on January the 27th, 1945, the soldiers and officers were confronted with a grim sight. Only about 7,000 inmates survived, most of them terminally ill, including 500 children. Few could stand upright.
But what my mother did was this. She said to me, "Listen, let me take you around and show you." She showed me people, all the teeth, because everything was open. She showed me eyeglasses. She showed me little children's shoes. She says, "I want you to see all of this."
In April 1945, US troops in Germany and Austria came upon concentration camps in Buchenwald, Dachau, Nordhausen, Mauthausen, and Ohrdruf. The soldiers saw the camps with their own eyes, and the truth was undeniable.
The ghastly nature of their discovery led General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe, to visit Ohrdruf on April 12th with Generals George S. Patton and Omar Bradley. After his visit, Eisenhower cabled General George C. Marshall, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, describing his trip to Ohrdruf. The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were so overpowering as to leave me a bit sick. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things, if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda. Bergen-Belsen concentration camp was liberated on April the 15th, 1945, by the British. The soldiers discovered 13,000 corpses lying around the camp unburied. The horrors of the camp, documented on film and in pictures, made the name Belsen emblematic of Nazi crimes for public opinion in many countries in the immediate post-1945 period.
The few who remained alive were staggering, on the verge of death. They were the survivors, and these were the rest, hurriedly murdered lest they be set free to live a normal life.
Six million Jews. 2/3 of all Jews living in Europe at that time were murdered during World War II in the Holocaust. If we were to observe a minute's silence for each one of them, we would remain silent for 11.5 years.
This is the legacy of Auschwitz. Do not be silent. Do not be indifferent. Do not just do this for the Jewish people around the world. Do this for your children. Do this for your grandchildren. Do not be silent. Do not be complacent. Do not let this ever happen again to any people.